Today on the No Gray Areas podcast, we welcome Greg Tonkinson, pastor, speaker, and author of Unwanted Fraternity. If you've ever experienced loss or walked through grief, this conversation will meet you right where you are. Greg opens up about the night that changed everything and how vulnerability, community, and faith can carry us through even the darkest seasons. Let's dive in. Greg Tonkinson, welcome to the No Gray Areas podcast. So good to have you on here. Pat. And you wrote a book called Unwanted Fraternity, which we're going to get into on what exactly that unwanted fraternity is. So let me open by just asking you this. Can you share your personal experience with grief?
Sure.
And how it changed you?
Yeah, it's one of those where if you say, don't think of white cars, and then you see a bunch of white cars. For me, back in 2010, if someone were to ask me at that point, living in a cul-de-sac, 2.5 kids, a dog, minivans, all that.
My wife had the American dream.
Exactly. Yeah. Wife was a nurse and worked at Phoenix Children's. I would say, man, I'm living a blessed life. I think that I was in ministry. God was blessing this time. So if you were to ask me back then, what is grief? I probably would have gave you an academic answer, maybe a textbook answer. Now I speak very experientially about grief, and because of March 6, 2010, it's that proverbial knock that you read about or listen to in podcasts or hear on movies where people say, and then the knock came at the door. None of us get the knock. And then that night, I got the knock, and it wasn't proverbial. It was literal. So it was about 7 or so that night. We were just about to head into spring break. My wife is a nurse, and I was an educator, and we were excited. We had 3 kids at the time, 10, 6, and 4. They're in the living room playing. It was a typical Saturday night in South Gilbert, quintessential suburb, and then that knock came, and when I opened the door, I was met with a police officer and 2 people who flanked him wearing dark windbreakers. And I thought, literally, it's amazing when you're in the moment, what your mind does and how it races to conclusions that typically aren't true. I thought I was in trouble.
You're trying to figure out what you did.
I thought this was the FBI.
Yeah.
And so I looked back at my 3 kids, and I knew my wife was coming home from work. And I started thinking, who can I call to come watch my kids, because I'm getting arrested for something. So nerves were running now. I'm on high alert. And this officer, he mid-20s, young guy. And I could just see it, the look in his eyes. He was dead serious. And again, I just thought, he's angry at me. And he said, "Is your name Greg Tonkinson?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Can we come in?" And I said, just instinctively said, "I need to see some ID. I don't know who these people are. I've got 3 kids in the back here." And he said, "My name is Officer so-and-so. This is a police chaplain, and this is a police child care person, and we need to talk with you." Still didn't get it. Still wasn't thinking. When I say that, and I've spoken on this to many audiences, they've already got it. Yeah. They've already made that connection.
Yeah.
I didn't.
You didn't.
So I'm looking back at my kids, and I'm thinking, why are they here? What is happening right now? And so he said, "Can we come in?" And so I let them in. We're in our front little area of the house. By this time, the kids had kind of gathered. My 10-year-old, 2 boys and a girl. My youngest is 4. She's a girl. And then my middle and older, they're all kind of gathered, kind of huddled and looking curiously at, what is happening. And again, I retrieve my information from movies where we're walking in, and I turned around and I said, he said, You're probably going to need to sit for this. And I pseudo-courageously said, "Hey, if you need to tell me something, just go ahead and tell me," as if I was like puffing my chest out. And that's when he said, "Man, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but about an hour ago, your wife your wife was killed in a car accident.
Hmm.
Again, you and I mean, we've been through a lot in ministry aspects and other aspects. I've never been in a position where words have weight, and those words had weight. Like literally, I heard that, and I caved. I dropped to the floor.
And is that what you mean when you say the words have weight?
The word, when he said,
down?
"Yeah, your wife was killed in a car accident. Not your wife's in the hospital. Not your wife." There was a finality to that sentence that, again, we read about it, we hear about it. It's never us.
Yeah.
And in 2010, it was me, and I just dropped to the ground. And in that moment, there's beauty in the ashes kind of a thing, because the kids just rushed me, almost trying to protect me. Try to be a 10-year-old and see your dad just buckle. And they didn't hear what he had said, so they don't know why this is happening. So they just I'm enveloped with these 3 little kids, and by God's grace, I just mustered the strength to look at them and I said, "Hey, mommy got killed tonight, and she's not with us. She's in heaven, and we're gonna see her again. But we've got some work to do." In the book, I call it our Holy Huddle. The 4 of us just had this moment in the midst of this overwhelming news that we were going to be together in this, and so made a call, and I'm told that this, because you lose track of what just happened. But I was told, I called my brother first, and then the word got out. Within 30 minutes or so, my house was filled at about 9:30 that night. And I tell you again, when I've had now 15 years, going on 15 years of looking back, what I hate about that night is that news came to me. What I love about that night is the community that my wife and I had built up to that point showed up, and they represented well. And we had pockets of the house. One group was they were angry. She was, come to find out, she was 2 miles from our house, sitting at a stoplight waiting to come home, and someone ran into the back of her, doing about 75, no brakes, and he was a 20-year-old kid, and hit her from behind and flipped the car, and she died instantly at the scene. I have a good friend who's a surgeon. I sent him the ME report, the autopsy report, and he got back with me and said, "Listen, probably one of the most violent reports I've read. On the other hand, it was so fast that she probably heard a sound, and that was it."
That was it.
So again, there's always 2 sides of angst and some solace in that.
Yeah.
So she was 2 miles away, and that's what happened. And so people were angry at that because we didn't know why it happened or how it happened. And then there was another group that were weeping, like biblically weeping.
Yeah.
Then there was another group that were quiet, and they were just lost in memory. She was 35 years old. So there was another group that were just trying to piece it all together. And I remember just looking around the house thinking, I don't want this, but I can't do it without these people. And it's amazing that lasted throughout the night.
Wow.
And that was the very first night I looked at these 3 precious kids, and I thought, I want them to have a memory of when they're ready to look back and say, what happened? So I started journaling that night. Day 0, and I got to day 365, and that's what turned into several years later the book.
The book. So the name, I think you just referenced it a little bit, but Unwanted Fraternity.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so got remarried, blended family, and my second wife, Jennifer, love her to death. It was right about 2018 or so we're about 8 years later, and she's the one that I said, hey, I'm thinking about putting some of this into book form. You weren't there. Like, can you imagine, like, the weight she must feel of, and she's an English teacher. She edited my book. So she had to read all of this, and that's a whole, another story. But Jen was the one who suggested, what do you want to name this? And so we started wrestling through, what is this about? And what we landed on was, nobody wants to be a part of grief. Nobody wants to be a part of suffering and pain. It's unwanted. I've never met someone. We speak at grief shares, we speak at divorce cares, we speak in churches and nonprofits, and I've never had someone come up and say, man, I'm so glad I'm a part of this. I wanted to be a part of this, right? And so nobody wants to be a part of it, but this idea that we are, so we're a part of this co-ed, young, old, socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity. Matthew 7 in the Bible talks about the winds and storms come to everyone. Mm-hmm. So you're a part of this fraternity. So it's an unwanted fraternity, but let's acknowledge we're a part of it. Maybe we can lock arms and try to walk through this together, because our tagline, both in the book and when we speak, is you're not alone in this. The worst thing you can do, I believe, is try to live your pain and grief alone. I think that's where the enemy gets a hold of us.
And this is what we often try to do in our grief, isn't it?
Especially a lot of guys try to just pull the boots up and just, power through it. And what I found,
we do that because it does it? I'm guessing here. So tell me if I'm wrong, but is it because like we think it makes us feel weak, or we feel weak to reach out? I mean, why do you think that it's specifically?
Yeah, pain involves vulnerability. It involves transparency. You think about when we meet people. I've often told groups I'm speaking to, what if we started the conversation instead of, hey, my name's Greg. Hey, Pat, what do you do? With, hey, my name's Greg. Hey, Pat, tell me your story. Because when we get into meetings where we're asking people their story, I'll preach at a church or teach at a place, and complete strangers, I'll inevitably share my story. And within a half hour, 45 minutes, well, however long, at the end, people are lining up with tears in their eyes. Hi, my name's Greg, hi, my name's Jane. I've been coming to this church. I've been coming to this place for 20 years. Nobody knows my story. You get me. Well, wait a minute, I just met you. Yeah, but you get me because the story of grief drives us down past the surface into some really foundational things about ourselves. Who am I? Why did this happen? Where am I going out of all this? How am I going to get there? And so I've lived that. And so I have nothing more to offer you than I'm one of you. I'm part of the fraternity.
The Unwanted Fraternity.
I don't have all the answers, but I get you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now we're bonded, intrinsically bonded in a way that we don't want to be bonded.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people struggle with, this is new. Yeah. I've spent my years living on the surface. And maybe I've got a few family members or a few friends that I confide in. But now I'm marked by this moment, this event. Mm-hmm. So I choose either to let people know about it, or I try to bury it and try to power through it. And I'm a big fan of, please don't try to power through it. Let people in on your story.
That seldom, if ever, ends well, does it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I remember 2 weeks after my event, it was about 2 months, got a call from a friend, and she said, good friend, and she said, you're never going to believe this. There's a guy at the hospital right now, lost his wife to a car accident. They have small children. She was a nurse. Like, everything was lining up to, you need to meet this guy. Drove up to the hospital, walked into this hospital room, and saw a guy working on his laptop, 2 little small kids. And I went over to him, and I've got tears in my eyes. And I said, man, I'm just so sorry for your loss. And he said, yeah, that's a rough one. Well, I got to work on Monday, just trying to figure out how I'm going to, but just kind of status quo. And I thought I was in the wrong room. I thought based on what I went through and the weight of this tragic event, that I can't be in the right room. Sure enough, I was, but he was taking the position of denial and trying to power through. This wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I just lost my wife.
Work on Monday. Yeah.
I've got 2 small children. Somehow I'll figure this out. We wrote the book to add to people's library of resources to say, in the middle of the night, when you've now realized you can't figure it out, read this, there's great books out there that will help you understand you're not alone. And there's actually ways that you can, I wouldn't say be successful, but at least endure this to where you can get up to where I am 15 years later and have great moments of joy and victory and purpose and not lose yourself in this tragic event, often that you didn't ask for, often brought upon you. And so that's why we wrote the book.
Well, and you just said, Greg, you talked about like in the middle of the night when you can't figure it out. That's one of the definitions of grief, isn't it? That when we're deep in grief, whatever brought that on us, that's part of what makes it so difficult is it's the why questions that are left unanswered, right?
And that's where they often come. I remember putting my kids to bed because, again, there's macro, micro, right? So macro is this just happened. How do I live? Micro is my kid's got a test tomorrow. My kid's got a project. My kid has to bring donuts tomorrow. How am I going to do that? And so you put the kids to bed, and now you've got from 9 at night till 6 the next morning, and those are sleepless nights. Those are nights where it doesn't shut off. You're laying in a bed where your spouse used to lay next to you. All of that, and so one of the things that helped me was to read other people's stories in that moment. I remember reading a book. Jerry Sitzer wrote a book called The Grace Disguised. And I read it, and he lost his wife, his mom, and one of his daughters in a car accident, got hit head on. So he wrote a book, and I read his book, and through a friend, actually got his phone number. So I called him, and he lives up in Washington. I called him, and we just spent time, again, this Unwanted Fraternity. He had me share my story. I get done with my story. There's a long pause on the other end. He's crying. And I read his book. I'm thinking, Jerry, why are you comparatively? And he said, Greg, you're about to go through what I've been through, and I wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
He knew the pain you were going to feel.
So I'm weeping for you. And again, beauty and ashes, he said, but I get you. And like I said, someone were to ask me, have you ever met a widow or a widower, a young widow or widower prior to March 6, 2010? Maybe a couple. I've met hundreds since then because we get each other, and God has a way of bringing these paths to cross. And all of a sudden, I don't need to know if you have a PhD in counseling. I need to know, do you get me?
Yeah.
And so my wife and I have found great value post 2010 in not wanting this. God, why me?
Yeah.
And instead of trying to answer that question, it's just embracing the reality that it is you. And so what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And we've tried the best we can to avail ourselves to others and just broker relationships with, hey, I know someone who went through something similar. Can I put you in touch with that person? For nothing more than, what can happen over a cup of coffee when two people get each other? And so we just thought, man, God, if we could be used in that way, that's good enough for us.
Yeah. That phrase, I jotted it down here really quick when you said it, do you get me? Such a powerful phrase. And I think that's what's so powerful about that Hebrews passage where it talks about that we have this high priest now referring to Jesus who faced the brokenness of this world and waded in the muck and mire. He stood at funerals and cried over friends, over his dad, over others. So we actually pray to a God now when we're deep in our grief who gets us. Like he felt the grief.
And I couldn't write the book, quite honestly. The tagline is an authentic healing that can only come through Christ. That was the impetus for the book. I didn't want to write another self-help. Hey, just follow these 7 steps. This is not that kind of book. This is, here's my story. But at the end of every chapter, it's how does Jesus relate to any of this? And so when I go through each chapter, I bring it back to, here's how our Savior related to pain and suffering. Here's how he related to isolation. Here's how he related to knowing what was coming in terms of enduring pain. Just so you would get the focus off of this guy named Greg who went through something tragic to, no, here's your authentic healing. Lean into Jesus. And that was my hope and prayer was, hey, it's all about your walk with him, not how well we connect. If I can help you, praise God. But this is about understanding your Savior went through far worse, but deeply, deeply understands your pain and wants to walk with you through it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, to me, that's one of the greatest hopes.
That
when
is.
I've gone through painful things in my life, when I realize I'm praying to a God who understands, like he went through it. He knows what it's like, that raw emotion that it doesn't make sense, those things. He understands that. So, and Greg, this is why I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you're telling your story, because this is a universal issue.
It is.
There's not a single person who's listening. Their story's a little different than yours, maybe.
Absolutely.
My story is different than yours. I haven't had to say goodbye to a spouse like that, and I can't imagine the pain that would have. But we've all dealt with grief. Scott Peck wrote a book back in the 70s. Can't remember the name of the book, but my mom would always quote it to me. And the very first line, and this is the part she'd always quote to me, life is hard. She'd always say, life is hard, Patrick. And I always, because I'm a Mr. Positivity, Pollyanna type thing. But the longer I live, the more powerful life is hard. You will not live a couple of decades on this planet without going through grief and lament. And then the Bible is full of talking about lamenting.
It is.
But Greg, on the same side of that though, I think because of the culture, and every culture's got its issues, but there's so many myths to grief and lies about grief that we kind of inherently bring and I'm going to own some of this, bring our families up under that don't help us when grief hits, right? Like, again, just a silly example, but your child's pet dies. And so you go, well, we'll go get another pet. So you're subtly teaching them that you can replace something.
Right.
That's not going to solve, you got to grieve. That pet died.
That's right.
Help them grieve that pet. And maybe you can go get a new one.
Sure.
But you got to go through that process. That's just one of many silly illustrations we could come up with. So I want to come back to that and talk a little bit about what you think some myths of grief are and what we should and shouldn't say to someone who's walking through grief. But let me go back to your story for a moment, if that's okay. What was that like? Because I can't imagine, and you talked about just the weight of it pushing you to the floor. Your kids come up, you got the house full of people. I imagine, though, that some of the more difficult times came a couple of weeks later when the people are no longer there and you put the kids to bed. And now you're alone.
It's amazing when you think hearing that news is the worst it can get. Well, then you have to go shopping for a cemetery plot. Then you have to pick out a coffin. Then you have to pick out burial clothes. Then when we had less than a week later, we had a memorial service and then the funeral, they opened the funeral home and the doors and that was the first time I saw her since the accident, because praise God that the young police officer knew enough. He was first on the scene. He had seen the accident, and then he came directly from there to my house. And when he did, again, instinctively, I wanted to go rescue my wife. I understood, I think, cognitively that she wasn't no longer here, but that impulse took over of I need to go save her. And so he physically had to kind of restrain me that was not going to be a wise decision. Again, like I said, the card flipped over, gas was pouring down on her. It was just not a good scene. And so I'm very thankful that my last memory of her wasn't seeing her in that accident.
Yeah.
But the next time I did see her was 6 days later in a coffin in a funeral home. And I don't want to be morose, but when you think that the pain is the worst it's going to get is hearing that news, there's some naivety to that, because the pain just, it's like a blade that just kept turning inside of me. Every time I looked around thinking, when is this going to end? And so, yes, for several weeks after that, just the decisions you have to make when you lose a loved one, they're just compounded. And so you just start drowning in those decisions. And so, yeah, for me, it was really that plus getting to a point where I went back to work, and now you have to embrace the incredibly difficult, awkward conversations with coworkers that they don't know what to say. They don't know how to, and honestly, there were days where I just wanted to go to work and just kind of forget about it for a little while. But then a coworker would come up and be crying right in front of me and bring it all right back to, memories. And I mean, I'll be driving somewhere and a song will come on, or I'll see something and you're just right back in it. So you don't ever get away from it, including when you do, like you just said, you wake up and my house was full of people, and then it slowly dissipates to nobody's there. I had a good friend that she's a hairdresser, and she recalls a few weeks after this cutting someone's hair, just started crying, and that person had the audacity to say, it's been 6 weeks.
Oh.
And I know we may talk about this later, but like things not to say.
Yeah, go ahead and go there.
Moments not to bring that up. Again, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think that most of us have not done enough in circles of grief to where we know both how to be a recipient of grief, but also how to be around those who are in grief.
Yeah.
The church, I think, has struggled with, what do we do when we hear this news? And like you said, the fraternity is so big because it's not just you've qualified because you lost a loved one. Well, I've talked to people that have been single their whole life, and they can't understand why. I've talked to people that have been divorced 1, 2, 3 times. They can't understand why. I've talked to people who've been abandoned by their adult children. Like the fraternity is so big because we cast the net out to say, if you've experienced pain, you're in the fraternity. And if you haven't, you probably just haven't lived long enough. It's coming.
For sure.
So it's a little bit of a misnomer that some people are not in the fraternity. I like to say not yet in the fraternity, but we're all in it on some degree. And by the way,
was my mom, by the way, Greg. That was what my mom was trying to teach me when I was younger. But because I'm kind of wired like the Pollyanna. Younger people probably won't know what I'm talking about. The old Walt Disney movie. Right. I don't even want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. And again, the older I get, the wiser I think that is, because it's not, if you're not in that fraternity, you will be.
100%. And again, like we look at people, we look at influencers, and for us, like the Tony Robbins of the day, and they just look like they've got it all together, and there's nothing. Just get around people and just get to know them. Like I said, ask them their story. You'll find out pretty quickly.
There's pain. There's pain
all
points,
broken. And if we're just willing to admit that. But one of the ways we can help each other is to read books like mine or others that will help you understand, hey, here are some things to do. Here are some things not to do. I would receive cards, beautifully written cards, but they would say things like, she's watching you right now, and she's an angel. And someone actually wrote a book for me and the kids that I have yet to read to them, because it wasn't accurate as to what happened. What happened in my worldview is that Leanne was killed on March 6th, immediately ushered into the throne room of God, where she is praising him and enjoying his presence. And I'm not so sure that she's waiting, like all believers are, for us to arrive. But I'm not sure they're asking God, hey, can I go back? And so we just have to get our theology a little more accurate, which I would say embrace someone's grief. Don't run from it. Allow them to express emotions in ways that they want to express it. The Jewish people Orthodox Jews have a great cultural tradition of sitting Shiva.
Yes.
And they'll go to someone's house for 7 days and they'll take their cue from the person. And I thought, what a beautiful thing that we're just going to go and sit in silence. And when you want to talk, we'll talk. When you want to laugh, we'll laugh. When you want to cry, we will cry. But we're not going to dictate and tell you how you need to feel. And I just wish
So sometimes sitting Shiva would be that you're just sitting silently in that room with them
for long periods of time.
And
now,
that's okay.
Think about our culture today and how many of us get awkward when we're sitting silent for 30 seconds, let alone an hour or two.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to do better as a community, either in the church or outside of the church, of, hey, I don't understand this because I haven't experienced it, but I'm here for you. And by the way, I tell people all the time, being there for someone, I highly, highly recommend in person. Yes, we have technology today that helps us, but I would absolutely, if at all possible, do face-to-face. If it's not, yes, FaceTime will work or a phone call. The worst you can do is text someone. I'd be inundated. And again, this is back in 2010 when iPhones were just starting to come out, and and so texting wasn't as prevalent as it is today. But we spend so much time on technology by way of texting and communicating via those mediums that it loses its importance, it loses its significance. And when you text someone, hey, I feel bad for you, that I guess it is what it is, but when I'm sitting with someone and I can see their nonverbals and I can read their face and they say the same thing, I feel bad for you, it hits different. I always recommend, if my house were filled that very first night with texts and cards, or it would have done what it did, but man, my house was filled with people.
Wow.
And those people were agents of God, Imago Dei, all experiencing their own pain from losing a daughter, from losing a sister, from losing an aunt, from losing a coworker, from losing a friend. I lost a wife. My kids lost a mom. We all are going to handle that differently, but we were all in the same space for hours. And that, like I said, there were moments where people were over here just sitting silent. And if you felt like just being quiet, go sit over there. There were people over here that were weeping if you needed to weep. When we read the Bible through the lens of our experiences, man, does it hit different. I've read the lament Psalms now in very, very different ways.
How do they hit different now?
Oh my gosh. You read Psalm 13 and David is, he's lamenting, he's upset, he's frustrated. He says, God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? I just, my tears are dried on my face. Like, I can't cry anymore, basically. And post 2010, I read that. And again, you get me. I get you. Like, there's going to be a moment in heaven, I think, where we're going to embrace these very human figures that sometimes we have falsely put on pedestals.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, man, what, are you kidding me? Like, talk to me, tell me your story. And we're just going to hug it out because we get each other now. So I read Psalm 13 and I'm thinking, this is me. God, this is me. I never thought it'd be me. And now it's me. the beauty of the lament psalms is every single one of them end with praise. And so there's this reality which I try to encourage people, young and old alike. Man, in your pain, not only does God get you, but if you thought God was good before your pain, please, please, please don't give up on God is still good in your pain. And then I turn them to the lament psalms because I need them to see the reality of these Bible characters that sometimes, again, we've misconstrued into only the good.
Them, right? Yeah.
So I turn them to lament psalms, and I just want them to understand, man, these people, they were hurting.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I appreciate about their walk with the Lord is they got to a point where they didn't give up. They said, God, you're still good. I still want to praise you. And it's almost like sometimes you get to, the back half of those lament psalms, you think it doesn't fit. And I thought, what a beautiful picture of grief. It doesn't fit. It's not, I can't give you 5 steps.
Greg, that's so good. I love that.
Just be with you and walk with you in it. And
it doesn't fit. I love that. I mean, I've preached on some of those lament psalms. I wish I could go back and redo those messages because they do it. You're right. I mean, again, listeners, please go read some of those lament psalms, especially if you are grieving, because they are raw.
They're raw.
And sometimes you're like, I can't believe they said that to God.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden they're praising God at the end. It's like, this doesn't fit.
Right.
What a picture of grief. That's what makes it so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And yet I got the knock on the door, and so very few of us, I think rightly so, we don't go into the day saying, I want to learn all about grief so I can prepare myself. You're just living life. And all of a sudden that cul-de-sac, 2.5 kids turned into, you're going to be a widow. Deal with it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know the first thing about dealing with it, which is
prep, nothing.
No prep, which is funny because, at that time I had my master's in divinity. I was working on my doctorate. So you would look at maybe the profile of the person and say, well, if there's anyone that can handle it, you fit into that. No, you're a fish out of water. You're in over your head if you think you can handle grief. When it comes your way, the best thing you do is lean into Jesus, and then surround yourself with people that love you and care about you, and to be vulnerable to the point of don't hide your story. Again, be discreet with how much you share, but don't play it as like, this is just a part of me. No, this is you. This is a part of your story now, and it's about how you're going to handle it. And what I noticed was when you experience grief, people are watching you. They want to know, hey, how are you doing it? Because I'm either in it or my family member's in it. Yeah. I've got a coworker that's in it.
Yeah.
Like, we're all searching for, hey, how are you doing it? And let's not be pretentious and say, well, I'm doing it the right way. But I think there are healthier ways to do it.
Yeah.
And then there are unhealthier ways to do it.
Yeah.
And the fraternity is just about helping people engage in those healthier ways to do it.
Yeah. I really like how you put that. There's healthy ways and unhealthy ways to put it. Because again, like you just said, grief is one of those things that creates a level playing field, right?
It does.
I don't care.
Exactly.
You could be upper class. You've got so many letters after your name that it's like the alphabet soup type thing, and you got it all together. But
and now you're sleeping alone.
Yep.
Now,
and you're down at that same level as that person who, so it kind of levels the playing field.
Really does.
But on that level playing field, there's healthy and unhealthy ways to deal with it.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I was alluding to earlier. I think that culturally we'd be a little surprised if we really step back and started thinking through how we were raised, whether it's by our family or our culture or our school or our church or, whatever it is. There's some of these myths of grief that we picked up that we didn't even realize.
That's right. And I would say, Pat, that
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode so far. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss a future podcast. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
the Bible talks a lot about wise counsel. And sometimes I think we just look at wise counsel when I need to make a business decision, or when I need to, what college should I go to? Or, wise counsel also applies to how do I handle grief? And how do I deal with pain? How do I deal with interpersonal relationships? How do I raise my kids now as a single dad? How do I date as a 42-year-old guy who hasn't dated for decades? Like, surround yourself with men and women who either have been down the road a little further than you have demonstrated a clear, albeit imperfect, walk with the Lord, people that you will confide in, because these areas, I mean, honestly, I remember 2012, I started to just think about, God, do you want me single the rest of my life? I'm kind of in that bubble of young 40s, got small kids. Is that like, is my ship sailed, or is there another person out there? So we start making decisions out of impulse, and that is very dangerous. And now, for me, when I started dating again, the worst thing I could have done was done that on my own. I mean, I have 3 kids now that are looking at who's going to be a person maybe in their life that's going to be their stepmom, that's going to be their mom, like is going to take over that maternal aspect of their lives. Well, that's a decision you don't want to make foolishly.
Wow.
So to do that on my own, well, if I'm not going to do it on my own, that means I've got to be transparent with people. I got to be vulnerable with people. I have to allow people to give their opinion on who I should date, how I should date, when. So again, we've got to get rid of that pride and step into an era of humility, which, unfortunately, it just keeps stacking up. In other words, God, I just went through this painful experience. Now you're asking me vulnerable. Like, when does it end? And I'm telling you, it doesn't end. But I tell people this all the time. I've never had more than I've had in the past 15 years. I've never given away more than I've given away in the past 15 years. I've laughed deeply in these past 15 years. I've rejoiced greatly in these past 15 years. People ask, and it's a no-win question. So again, if we're taking notes on what to do, what not to do, don't ever ask someone, do you want it back? If you could wave a wand and have it not have happened, would you? Because so much has happened since then. It's an unfair question to everyone involved, including me, and it puts you in a very difficult position. Because now the tension is, well, of course I want my wife back. And now I'm married to this other woman whom I deeply love. I've got kids. I've got a grandkid now. So don't ever ask that question.
That's good.
You can't go back. Good. And so there's no win in that.
Yeah.
So since then, Jennifer and I have had this in the last chapter in the book. It's called Wonderfully Messy, because that's our life right now. It's wonderful. And it's incredibly messy. And that's the reality we're in.
Yeah, yeah. So let's land there for just a moment. Probably have some listeners, and some of them are going through grief right now, and they're really connecting to your story in some ways. Some of them, like all of us, have been in those situations where you're sitting in the room now, I'm like, I don't know what to say or do. So give us you've referenced a few, but what are some things that you would say, like, don't say this or do this? You've given us a few.
Yeah.
Give us a few more.
Sure.
And then we'll do the things to say or do.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I would say on the don't list, I would include in that, don't predict how they should feel or when they should feel. And so it's not great to tell someone you should be feeling a certain way. There were moments where, and everyone who's gone through this can relate, you will go through the array of emotions in one day, even in 1 hour. And so you could be laughing hilariously at a memory, a fond memory, and then that same memory will bring you to tears. And
was that confusing to you?
Super confusing.
Yeah.
I did a TEDx talk, 2017, I believe, and it's called Faith and Doubt. And the confusion leads to what is happening here? Again, on a meta narrative level of like, God, are you real? Does this exist? Like, how are you doing? But it starts with, I'm laughing and crying. How does this work? And when you couch that in, I've got to raise kids, I've got to go to work, I've got to be productive, I've got to, it just gets super confusing really fast. And then all of a sudden you're down the rabbit hole of, what is this all for?
Yeah.
Is God still good? I mean, all of that. So,
and so the worst thing to say then is for someone to come in and go like, "Hey, Greg,
you're laughing.
Your stage of grief right now should be this."
100%. You're exactly right. Like let's see, 3 weeks in, you should be feeling, and you try to predict that.
Yeah. Okay. That's
often.
helpful.
So that's number one. Number two is don't try to project your feelings onto that person, because again, you have a relationship with that individual that is unique to you. You may have been a best friend. You may have been a high school alum. You may have been a coworker. And you come into conversations feeling a certain way. Perfect. It was unfortunate when people felt a certain way and then thought I had to feel that same way. And so just don't project your emotions onto the other person. Accept them where they're at and vice versa. The third thing I would say is don't try to predict or don't try to be a prophet or a theologian in the moment. I love Bible verses. I love being encouraged by Bible verses. What was discouraging was people trying to have me remember where Leanne is after the accident, what she's doing. I know where she is. I know what she's doing, but she's my wife. And I'm not going to, if I live the average number of years, I'm not going to see her for another 4.5 decades. I get it. There were moments where I just didn't need to hear that. I wanted my wife back, and it didn't bring me any comfort to know that she's in heaven. We couch those phrases with, God had a better plan for her. God's timing is perfect. She's in a better place.
She's in a better place. I knew that one was coming.
No, the better place is in my house right now, reading with my kids. Like, in my opinion, that was the better place. Now, I know theologically, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I just don't need to hear it right now.
No, Greg, I talked to someone who lost a spouse, and that was exactly what they said to me. Because they were confused.
Yeah.
And they said, you know what I'm tired of hearing? I'm tired of hearing people say that she's in a better place. Yeah. I get it. But you know where I want her? I want her in bed next to me at night. I want her in the morning making breakfast with the kids. That's where I want her. So he goes, this is just confusing me more.
Yeah. And again, we try to fill the silence with words. And again, just own it. Sit in the silence. Be okay with that. I remember, and again, sitting Shiva is when someone has passed away. I remember going to a coworker's house. I was out of state. I was at a conference doing something, and I got a call from his wife and said, hey, we got some bad news. His health is deteriorating. He's invited 6, 7 of you to come over Friday night, whatever it was, sit around the campfire. Would you do that? I texted her back, I'm honored that you would consider me a part of that group. Now, again, he hadn't passed away yet, but it was inevitable. 6 or 7 of us sitting around a campfire for 3 or 4 hours. I think we said maybe 10 words. Mm-hmm. It was profound to which the day after, 2 days after, I got an email from the wife saying, I just can't tell you how much that meant to him. And I want to say, if my timing's right, somewhere less than a year later, he passed away. Mm. And none of us will forget that moment. Mm-hmm. You don't have to fill the void with words, even if they're, scripture verses or whatnot. Like, read the room and pick your moment, but understand that you don't understand what that person is going through.
Yes.
Even if you've gone through something similar. Yes. I took my kids 10 years after the accident to a hotel. The 4 of us sat in a room. And I said, I'm so sorry that this is way late, because now they're 14, 16, and 20. And we're all sitting in this room. And I said, I want you to tell me, what were you going through? Because my mom's still alive. You lost your mom.
So you're telling them, I don't know. I lost a wife, but you lost a mom. I don't understand. Wow.
Since then, that in that time frame, they graduated from high school. One of them got married, or was going to get married. They had jobs. They had gone through experiences without their mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled us all together, and we had this beautiful, heartbreaking moment of, I don't get it. I need you to help me understand. So that would be on the, long story short, that would be on the side of what to say.
Mm-hmm.
I love you. I care about you. Help me understand what you're experiencing. Help me understand what it means to lose someone at your time, at your discretion. And then finally, I would say, it is cliche, but it was super helpful to have people say, name what I can do. And so the tweak on that, if I could say, Pat, is not, hey, let me know if I can help you. It's too vague. And in the moment, I didn't know. I was crushed with everything from paying bills to getting the kids to school to. So when someone says, hey, just what can I do? I didn't know how to answer that. It was better when someone said, I'm going to do something. Here are 3 things. Here are 5 things that I think you need, you could use. Pick 2, pick 1. And they were practical things. It was, getting groceries. It was helping to pay bills. It was taking the kids to school. I mean, just use common sense, look around, and figure out, if I were in that position, what might I need help with? Create a short list. Tell them, here's the list. You got to pick one of them. Because one of the things that I failed early on in my grief was, what's cathartic for people is to help you. That there's a sense of belonging, but also a sense of, I'm doing something for this person when I'm actually doing something. And so, yes, absolutely covet your prayers and help that person by praying for them. But when you get practical with, hey, I'm going to get you groceries. Do you like 2% milk or skim?
Yeah.
It was such a relief to come home knowing that the refrigerator was full, that the kids, I had a great friend. Again, I'm a widow. I'm raising a 10, 6, and 4-year-old. My 4-year-old's my daughter. I don't know how to do girls' hair. So I had a friend, she's a hairdresser. She made me these little index cards. Step 1, brush the hair. Step 2, like braiding hair. Like, how do you, what's a waterfall braid and what's a French braid and I don't know any of these things. She listed all these things. I pasted them up on my bathroom mirror, and Malia would get in the bathroom and I would just, step 1. Okay,
you're
step 2. I'm reading note cards, and I thought, I can't tell you how much that helped me.
Yeah.
So just be realistic and use common sense and just figure out, okay, what would that person need? Don't overwhelm them, but come alongside with real pragmatic things, and it will bless them tremendously.
Yeah, man, such great advice. So, Greg, I hear you doing this right now as you're talking, but it's been 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's a process with that. But for some that are listening to this, maybe they've lost someone that's close to them, especially if you're talking like a spouse.
Sure.
How do you honor the loved one, but move on living fully?
Yeah.
And I think early on in the grief, you're just overwhelmed with grief, and so you're just survival mode. But there's going to come a time where you're starting to move on.
Yep.
How did you navigate that? Because now it's been 15 years, but I see you doing both really well. In this interview, I can hear you're talking about how much you love your current wife and your family now that you have and the joy that you've had, but you're still honoring your wife that you lost.
Yep.
That's got to be a little confusing when you're first coming out of that deep grief.
Oh, man. Yeah, and so point number 1, I guess, is or encouragement number 1 is, don't rush the process. Way too many people do things impulsively that really put you down a dangerous path of making really poor decisions. And so this rebound effect of, I've got to now make up for what has been lost, and trust in the Lord, trust His timing. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Surround yourself with people that either have been down a little bit further, that love you more than you think they love you. Surround yourself with wise counsel, because when it comes to, okay, that initial wave of I'm a widow, it will dissipate to the point of, okay, how do I live as a widow? How do I function as a widow? And not just survive, but function, that I want to be proactive and I want to be a responsible person in society and whatnot. And so it was about 2 years or so for me where I started to realize this is my life. This is my reality. Now, God, do you want me to be single? Should I start looking for a future mate? I'm going
to interrupt for just a second because I don't want our audience to miss what you just said. It took 2 years.
Yeah.
Which again, I think that people that grief, it's so, especially something really deep and difficult like that, it's going to take some time. So it was 2 years before the reality of like, this is my life now. It wasn't a week or 2 weeks or a month.
No, and I tell everyone, because they say, well, what's the time? What's the right time? What's the perfect time? And I say, there's no perfect time, but at a minimum, go through all the seasons and holidays at least once. And so mine was March, and so I went through the summer, then the fall, then Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all the way back to what we call her heaven anniversary, which March 6th, 2011. Go through the entire year and live with those, your kids or loved ones or whatever your stage of life is, because our culture brings different emotions to these different seasons. And I know in Arizona, it's like one season, it's hot, but it's seasonal.
Yeah.
And I needed to see what, Christmas was like. I needed to see what birthdays were like. And so I got through year one. And then what you realize is in our lives, things are cyclical. And things are repetitive. And so I got through year one and realized, this is the second summer without my wife. Yeah, that looks familiar. Yeah, that feels familiar. I don't want it, but I'm getting used to it. So at the end of year two, I realized, okay, I think I can predict now. We would go to the cemetery every after church every Sunday. That dropped down to twice a week. It dropped down to once a week, right? I mean, Mother's Day, Leanne's birthday. I mean, so year two, I was like, okay, that feels not right. It feels familiar. So that's when I started to venture into, okay, what's next for me? And again, never ever forgetting, but always looking at the reality and the future of, okay, what might be next? So that was give it a year at least. Second thing was, I looked at my kids and thought, this is no longer about me. We all get married, typically younger, not all of us, but most of us get married younger in life, where there is a little bit of a myopic kind of feeling of, this is about me. Like, it's about me and my spouse.
Yeah.
Well, that ain't the case no more, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at 3 kids, and my stage of life, probably whomever I'm going to meet also has a history of some sort and may involve kids. And so sure enough, prior to dating Jennifer, I went to Leanne's mom, my mother-in-law, who they all live here locally. And so my parents live locally, Leanne's parents live locally, deeply involved in their grandkids' lives. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to start this process of maybe finding a future mate without full acceptance and I don't want to say clearance, but some sort of conversation with people who also lost a loved one. And I couldn't imagine future occasions where we're all together and there's friction and tension. So I went to Leanne's mom and I just said, listen, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And again, with tears in her eyes, she said, you need a wife and the kids need a mom. And so I'm excited for you. And so that began the journey of God, if you want this. And so I chose the route of dating online or dating apps. And, Yeah, and so Jennifer and I met in 2012. Now, again, whole nother episode, but we dated, and 6 weeks later, I proposed.
6 weeks?
6 weeks in front of the school. It was on eHarmony. We were supposed to be on one of their commercials. I mean, it was a big deal. And then a month before the wedding, I went over to her house and called it off. And so you want to talk about, I mean, just one thing after another. I mean, we were merging 2 families, 2 homes, it was like businesses being, and I'm looking around thinking, this is my reality now. Like, I just sold my house. We're moving into her home. We're combining families. This is such a paramount decision. Am I doing it? Do I know this person? 6 weeks. And so I went over there, and Jennifer's ex-husband had abandoned her and her kids. So she was dealing with incredible amounts of self-esteem and abandonment issues.
Mm-hmm.
And now here comes this guy that she met, seemingly a nice guy, seemingly has it together, fell in love with my kids right away. And she got the knock on the door. And it was me telling her, we can't get married right now. Well, we had already sent out invitations. I mean, it was just, It was a nightmare on wheels.
Wow.
And we worked through the whole weekend as to why and how and whatnot. Our conclusion after long discussions was we were infatuated with each other. We think we're in love with each other, but we're not quite sure. And if there's a decision that you need to make that you need to be sure on, it's this one.
Mm-hmm.
So we broke up for a few months. It was about 3 or 4 months. And it was, again, the clarity of God by being in his word. We both separated in terms of, like, we didn't talk to each other, didn't speak. And it was just kind of him revealing through his word and through conviction and whatnot, no, that she is the one. And it was that surety that I went back to her house, I think about 4 or 5 months later, knocked on the door again. And she answered, and this was after I got an email from her saying, I can't ever see you again because it's too painful. So when she opened the door and saw me, and she had given back my ring, I held the ring out, and I said, I'm sure now, like, we can drive to Vegas. We'll settle this now. So we ended up having a great family-oriented wedding.
Wow, that is an amazing
but
story.
I needed that surety.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement anyway, Pat, is to our listeners, grief has this hold on you. And we talked about extensively, but one of the things is it throws you into situations that you think you're making the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just blinded by so many other factors. I would just encourage you, get people around you that can see a little more clearly than you can. We met down in a coffee shop here in town. She walked through the door and I was just like, I can't believe, like, is this real? She came up to me and said, is your name Greg? And I thought, I'm back in high school again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is, so we were infatuated. Like, this person cares about me, and so pump the brakes. This is a long-term decision.
Yeah.
Make sure you're doing the right thing because other lives are at stake here. I mean, I looked at, she has two boys, like there were 5 kids that, we were making decisions on their behalf.
Family then, yeah.
Right. And so, we've been married for coming up on 12 years now. And again, wonderfully messy, but I wouldn't change it.
I love that. Wonderfully messy.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, Greg, man, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's
Thanks for having me.
Incredibly helpful. Like I said, Scott Peck started his book with Life is Hard, and it is. And so all of our listeners, myself included, yourself included, if God gives us any more years, we're going to go through some more grief.
Expect it.
Because life is hard. And so you really helped, I think, create a roadmap for us how to navigate it, but then also how to help other people.
Yeah.
With
You're
that.
not alone.
Yeah.
Don't ever think you are. So find those people, read some books, surround yourself with people that will pour into you because it's coming if it hasn't already.
Yeah. Is there, let me finish with this one more question and then we'll go to the 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
As we're wrapping up this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment on something you'll take away. All right, let's hop back into the remainder of the episode.
Is there a way for people to prepare? Like you were saying, there's no way to
Yeah.
prepare for that knock on the door that
Right.
you had, and I get that.
Right.
But at the same time, are there things
Yes.
that we would be doing now knowing that I'm going to go through some deep
Yep.
grief at some point?
Yeah, Pat, I would say ask people their story and tell your story. The more we're about the business of, again, not counting any pain as insignificant. It could be financial loss, it could be health issues, it could be relationship issues. Don't be afraid to tell your story. But if you're not in communities where that's accepted, where you feel like you're on the outside, always sharing your story, but not hearing other people's because of the dynamic of that community, I would seek other communities. We've got to find places where, again, I don't want to be weird about this, but there's got to be moments and room so that I have a network of people that know me and that I'm getting to know them. I think that the church is a great place to do that. There are other groups that may be equally powerful. And that way, when that happens, I'm not prepared necessarily, but I've shored myself up relationally to where we're going to do this together. And we're going to link arms and we're going to walk through this together. If I don't have those relationships, when that grief happens, I've met so many people, sadly, heartbreaking, when they tell me I'm alone in this. I'm away from maybe family, I'm out of state, I'm new at a job, whatever it may be, and I have no one. And my heart just breaks for them. So you'll never be fully prepared, but when I know your story and you know mine well enough to where we're below the surface, then when one of us does experience grief, man, you're the first one I'm calling.
Yeah.
And so then we can understand it together and, again, pray for each other, walk through it together, and encourage one another along the way.
You know what I thought of when you were talking about that, and again, this goes back to just the culture we live in, the time we live in with social media. And social media is not all bad. There's some good things about it. But the downside of it is, I think if any time in history there's this subtle lie that being well known and known well is the same thing, and they're not the same thing.
No.
Jonathan Haidt. Go ahead.
Jonathan Haidt, he wrote The Anxious Generation. He has this great little blurb in there. And he says there's a difference between community and networks. And he says community, they're hard to get in, they're hard to get out of. People know you in it, and there's a level of trust involved in that community.
So good.
Networks, strangers, they come and go when they want.
Yep.
He said what's fascinating is they're equally influential. So his encouragement is find yourself in community. It doesn't mean you can't be a part of a few networks, but understand their purpose. Mm-hmm. Find yourself in community, because when we deal with grief, it's that group that I'm going to lean into, not my network.
Mm-hmm. What was the name of that book?
The Anxious Generation.
I'm going to look that up. I really like that description too.
Community versus networks.
You need both.
You need both.
The community, when you go through, the network's not going to help you a lot in grief.
Yep.
The community will.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, Greg, 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
The irony is no gray areas. I'm going to ask you to lie to me. So give me 3 statements. 2 will be truths, 1 will be a lie, and I got to try to guess the lie.
Okay. I won an all-expense paid trip European cruise. It's fascinating. Okay. I broke my femur bone, thickest bone in your body, when I was in high school.
Okay.
And I interviewed, 45-minute interview with a former president, U.S. president.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to say the interview with the president is true, because that's just so far out there. That's got to be true. Is that true? I'm trying to narrow down. Okay, I got a 50-50 chance now.
President Bush, yeah.
Did you really? How cool was that?
45-minute. Yeah, 500 people in the audience, and he and I sat for 45 minutes in front of them, and he is, politics aside, he was such a grandfatherly type. Yeah. He likes to talk, which when you do interviews is super helpful.
Yes, totally.
And so I was just throwing him questions.
Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, I was just throwing him questions, and it was a highlight of my life. It was phenomenal.
How cool. That's amazing.
Yeah. Super fun.
I've heard that from people that I know, a few people that knew him personally.
Yeah.
And said that he is a humble leader.
There was
we don't see that,
really, honestly, I mean, we were standing, Mac Powell from Third Day was out there singing, and so we're behind the curtain, and Mac was running late, so there's 15 minutes or so where it was unaccounted for. It's me, President Bush, Secret Service, and that was it. And I'm thinking, why am I here? And just,
that's amazing
for whatever reason. So I just don't take those time for granted, but it was a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Well, one gift from that is what better if you have to do 2 truths and a lie. How many people get to say I did a 45-minute interview with the president? So that's pretty cool. All right, I'm down to a 50-50 chance. You won a European cruise and broke your femur. I'm going to say you broke your femur in high school.
Man, you're a prophet. Yeah, I was playing football, and
you still look athletic. You're still so. I assumed you did athletics when you were younger. That's why I got
the back in New York again. The ground was hard. This was neighborhood football. The ground was hard as in November. And someone threw me a lame duck pass, and had to wait for it to come down. As soon as I caught it, the kid hit from behind and landed on my left knee, and the ground wasn't moving, and he wasn't moving. And so it was, if you broke a stick, it was that sound.
It sounded like you could hear that.
Everyone, like 16-year-olds, knew something really, really bad just happened. And and back in the day, this was back in the mid-'80s, They took me to the hospital. Well, they don't do this anymore, but they gave my dad the option of, we'll either do surgery or put him in traction for a month. So traction is where they drill a pin through your shin bone. They hang weights off the bed, and basically it pulls the bone apart to where it heals itself so you can avoid surgery. And my dad said, traction it is. So I was in the hospital for a month with this pin in my leg, and sure enough, the bone healed. Well, 30 days later, the doc comes in and he's like, "Hey, looks like we're about good, so we're just going to take the pin out." Well, I still have it. It's a threaded screw that's about this long, and it goes all the way through your shin bone, and then they attach the weights to the end. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. So wheel me down to surgery or whatever. So he just closes the curtain in the room, and he tells my parents, "Hey, go stand outside because it's about to get real in here." And my parents, I'm 16. So the nurse is standing there. And so it's just me, him, and the nurse. He literally, I'm not kidding, true story. He pulls out a U-shaped hand drill and a pair of bolt clippers. And I'm like, is this a horror movie? Like, where am I right now? And he cuts off one of the ends of the screws. And so now it's just my shin and the other end sticking out. He walks around to the other side of the bed and he clamps on this hand drill. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, stop, And so he says, okay, here's the deal. Grab the nurse's hand, grab the back of the bedpost. And he said, I'm going to start getting this screw out of your leg because it's a threaded screw. And he said, here's the problem is I've done this long enough to know no matter what you say, I'm not stopping, because it's going to be a lot of pain. I'm just going to tell you that up front. If I stop, I'll never start again. You'll pass out. If I go too fast, it'll rip the bone. So I've got to do it very methodical, very, carefully. And so I'm going to count to 3 and just start going. And I'm not kidding you. Worst pain I've ever had in my life. Worst pain. Worse than the break. It was worse than the femur break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my glorious, recalling back to 16. So,
wow.
Yeah, I don't recommend anyone break their femur.
I doubt they do it that way anymore.
I'm hoping they don't. It was archaic, man.
They gotta come. That sounds like one of the old westerns we watch, right? Where they give you some
bite
alcohol
the bullet,
and bite the bullet or something.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Greg, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me, Pat.
you.
Absolutely.
I think it's amazing how, as painful as that story was, and probably still is in some ways, how God is using it in so many ways, in so many lives. And so I appreciate you use this word many times through this interview, but vulnerability.
Yeah.
And you've been very vulnerable, and so appreciate that. That's going to help our audience.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Greg's story is a powerful reminder that grief doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be felt, shared, and walked through together. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need the encouragement. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. We'll see you next time on No Gray Areas.